Josip Broz Tito, the partisan who rose from poverty to command a nation, the worker who became a ruler, and the dictator who refused to kneel before anyone. To the world, he was a mystery, a communist who defied Moscow, a strongman who charmed the West, a tyrant who smiled in every photograph. But behind that smile was a man who had faced death too many times to take it seriously anymore. Tito was born in 1892 in a small village called Kumrovec, deep in the heart of Croatia, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He was the seventh of 15 children, hungry, barefoot, and forgotten. His father drank, his mother prayed. From an early age, he learned two things that would shape his life: the value of hard work and the danger of authority. By 12, he was already working in the fields. By 16, he had become a metalworker, the kind of job that turned boys into men and men into steel. When World War I broke out, the empire sent him to fight in the trenches. He was wounded, captured by the Russians, and sent to a prison camp in Siberia. Most men broke there. Tito didn't. He learned Russian, joined the revolution, and watched the old world burn. The chaos of revolution taught him something crucial. Power belongs to those who take it. When he returned to the Balkans, he was a changed man, no longer a subject, but a believer. He joined the Communist Party, organized strikes, and spent years hiding from police. In the 1930s, he was arrested, imprisoned, and tortured by his own government. But nothing could bend him. He came out harder, colder, and more ambitious than ever. Then came 1941. Hitler invaded Yugoslavia, tearing the country apart in a matter of days. Monarchs fled, armies collapsed, and chaos reigned. But in the mountains, a new kind of army was born, led by Tito. He united peasants, workers, and soldiers under one flag, the Red Star. His guerrillas struck from the shadows, attacking German convoys, derailing trains, and freeing villages. They were ruthless, disciplined, and everywhere. The Nazis called them terrorists. The people called them heroes. By 1944, Tito commanded hundreds of thousands of fighters. He had become a symbol of resistance, the man who refused to die. When the war ended, he didn't just liberate Yugoslavia, he took it for himself. No elections, no compromises. In a world divided between East and West, Tito carved a third path, his own. At first, Stalin admired him. Two revolutionaries, two survivors, bound by ideology and ambition. But that friendship would soon turn to fear. Stalin demanded obedience. Tito refused. When Moscow ordered Yugoslavia to submit to Soviet control, Tito said no. He would not let Yugoslavia become another puppet. "I am no one's servant," he told his generals. "Not Hitler's, not Stalin's." That single act changed history. In 1948, Stalin expelled Yugoslavia from the Cominform, the Communist Alliance. It was a death sentence. No one defied Stalin and lived. Yet Tito did. He turned inward, consolidating power, tightening his grip on the army, and building a cult of personality strong enough to survive isolation. His portrait hung in every school, every factory, every home. People whispered his name like a prayer, or a warning. But Stalin wasn't finished. The KGB sent assassins, infiltrators, and spies. One carried a bomb disguised as a pen. Another planned to poison his food. All failed. Tito's intelligence network, one of the best in Europe, uncovered them all. Finally, Tito sent a message to Moscow that became legend. "Stop sending people to kill me. We've already captured 5 of your assassins. If you don't stop, I'll send one to Moscow, and I won't have to send a second." Even Stalin, the man who had killed millions, backed down. From that moment, Tito was untouchable. He became the face of a new kind of socialism. Independent, nationalist, proud. He formed alliances with countries across Asia, Africa, and Europe, leading what would become the non-aligned movement, a third force in a world split between America and the USSR. To Washington, he was a communist they could talk to. To Moscow, a traitor they could not kill. At home, Tito ruled with both charm and terror. He built hospitals, schools, and factories, but also prisons. On the island of Goli Otok, political dissidents were beaten and broken under the sun. Thousands disappeared. Still, the people adored him. He threw parades, waved from his car, smiled like a movie star, and made Yugoslavia believe it was different from the rest of the Eastern Bloc. In many ways, it was. Under Tito, Yugoslavia had open borders, Western music, Hollywood movies, and foreign travel, luxuries unimaginable elsewhere behind the Iron Curtain. He was both the jailer and the liberator, the father and the ruler. By the 1970s, Tito was one of the most powerful men in the world. He hosted kings, presidents, and movie stars. He smoked Cuban cigars, wore tailored white suits, and entertained guests on his private island of Brajuni. When Queen Elizabeth visited, he greeted her with a lion cub. When Richard Nixon came, he offered brandy from his own cellar. But behind the opulence, his empire was fragile, held together by his presence alone. Yugoslavia was not one nation, but 6: Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, Slovenia, Montenegro, and Macedonia, each with its own language, religion, and history. They didn't love each other. They loved Tito. As long as he lived, he was the glue. But even he couldn't live forever. By the late 1970s, the cracks began to show. His health declined, his leg became infected. He was forced to use a wheelchair. but he still appeared at parades, waving to cheering crowds, his face pale but his eyes burning with pride. To his people, he looked immortal. To those closest to him, he looked tired. "If I stop now," he told his doctor, "everything I built will fall apart." He was right, but he wouldn't live to see it. By 1979, the man who had once outsmarted Hitler and defied Stalin was losing a different kind of war, one against his own body. Tito's leg had turned black from infection, and the doctors could no longer ignore it. They performed an emergency amputation, hoping to save him, but the infection spread faster than their courage. Even as his health crumbled, Tito refused to admit weakness. When journalists asked about his condition, his aides replied with the same phrase every time: "Comrade Tito is recovering." He wasn't. He was moved to a hospital in Ljubljana, guarded, isolated, and silent. Every visitor had to pass through layers of security, as if the man in the bed still ruled an empire. And in a way, he did. Ministers from across Yugoslavia visited, each pretending not to see what was obvious. Their leader was dying, and with him, the country they barely held together. Tito knew it. He joked with his doctors, asked for music, and demanded his favorite cigars. Sometimes he'd talk about his youth, the battles, the betrayals, the victories that shaped him. "I've lived 3 lives," he once said, "and if I had to, I'd live them all again." The nurses said he smiled often, not the forced smile of a politician, but the faint, peaceful smile of a man who had already made peace with his fate. In the final days, his breathing slowed, his pulse weakened. On May 4, 1980, as the afternoon sun slipped through the blinds, Tito's laughter echoed faintly through the room. One last sound of defiance, one last victory over fear. Moments later, his heart stopped. The monitors went silent. The man who had ruled Yugoslavia for 35 years was gone. News of his death spread like thunder. For a moment, the entire country froze. Then came the sound of sirens, the toll of church bells, the weeping of millions. Across the Balkans, people poured into the streets, Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, Slovenes, united not by love for each other, but by grief for the man who had kept them from tearing each other apart. His funeral became one of the largest in modern history. Over 200 world leaders attended, kings, presidents, and prime ministers from both sides of the Iron Curtain. Richard Nixon, Margaret Thatcher, Leonid Brezhnev, Fidel Castro, Yasser Arafat, even Queen Elizabeth sent a representative. Enemies stood side by side to honor a man who had refused to belong to either of them. As the coffin passed through Belgrade, wrapped in the Yugoslav flag, the crowd cried out, "Tito! Tito!" Thousands fainted from emotion. Some fell to their knees. Others simply stared, unsure what the future would look like without him. It was the last time Yugoslavia stood united, because everything Tito feared was about to come true. After his death, the carefully balanced system he had built, the fragile network of republics and ethnic identities, began to unravel. The leaders who came after him promised stability, but none had his charisma, his authority, or his ruthlessness. In the 1980s, nationalism resurfaced. Economic crisis deepened. By the 1990s, the country he had created began to tear itself apart in a series of brutal wars. The same mountains where Tito's partisans once fought the Nazis now echoed with the gunfire of neighbors killing neighbors. The dream of unity died with him. Some called it justice, that the nation of a dictator fell after his death. Others called it tragedy, that his iron hand was the only thing keeping centuries of hatred from erupting again. But one truth remained. Tito had held back history itself for as long as one man possibly could. Today, his mausoleum still stands in Belgrade, the House of Flowers. Thousands visit every year. Some come to honor a hero, others to remember a tyrant. His face still appears on posters, his quotes in songs, his myth in the stories of those who lived under his rule. Even now, decades later, the question remains, who was he really? A liberator or a dictator? A visionary or a deceiver? Perhaps he was all of them. What made Tito unique wasn't that he lived longer than Stalin, or that he ruled with both charm and terror. It was that he managed to make an entire nation believe in him, and only him. He built a country on charisma and fear, on pride and illusion, and when he laughed for the last time, the spell finally broke. He once said, "I will die as I lived, on my feet." And though his body betrayed him, his legend never did. He was the worker who became a general, the general who became a ruler, and the ruler who became a myth. The only man who could make Stalin flinch, and the dictator who died laughing. If you believe that stories like this should never be forgotten, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video, because history only lives if we keep it alive.